Okay, just to recap, the Mishnah said, the Mishnah, again, we're dealing with languages. What did the person mean? So a guy says, koinim yayin, he's not going to drink wine. He makes a neder, I'm not drinking wine. And he says, ad ha-pesach, until the yontif of Pesach. So then it means, aser ad shiagia. It means, ad ha-pesach means he can't have drink wine until yontif of Pesach. Ad shiyahei, also ad shiyetzi. Hi, Lewis. We just began. We didn't even start the Gemara yet. I'm just reviewing the Mishnah. When a person says ad shiyahei, means until Pesach departed. Okay, so your difference between ad Pesach and ad shiyahei. And then we learned in the Mishnah, if a person says ad lifnei Pesach, a guy says, I make a neder until before Pesach. So Rabbi says ad shiyagia. That means until before Pesach. Rabbi Yossi aser ad shiyetze, because Rabbi Yossi says you aser until Pesach departs. We're going to discuss all this in the Gemara. Very simple. We're up to Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, short Daf today, and here's the Gemara. The Gemara starts off with a question. Ibayalahu. The Gemara asks a question. If I would take a nether, I say I'm not drinking wine for this week. So everybody knows this week means Sunday through Shabbos. Shabbos is included in this week, right? But let's say somebody says, I am not drinking wine for this till Yovel, the whole Yovel, for Yovel. Yovel, just recall, is the 7 years of Shemitah, 7-year cycles. Each 7th year is a Shemitah year. And then on the 50th year, the Torah says, celebrate Yovel. Now, the question is, you're holding, let's say, the 20th year of the Yovel cycle. And you say, I make a net, I'm not drinking wine until Yovel. Do you mean including Yovel? Or Yovel is not included? Now, what's the question? The question is, fascinating question. It's good to know this question. Does Yovel, the 50th year, is that an extra year, like a neutral year? And then we start the counting of 50 years again, or when you reach year number 49, 49th year is Shemitah, right? It's the 7th year. Yovel is also a Shemitah, but it's counted already starting the next cycle. Got it? Starting the next cycle. So Yovel is the first of the next 49 years. The Torah says celebrate the 50th year as a Shemitah year. So the Gemara asks a question. Ibai lahu. Okay, so from Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Ibaylahu. Omar, a person says, Yain Shani Toyim, I'm not drinking wine, Yovel, until this Yovel. What did he mean to say? Shnasa Chamishim is Kalifne Chamishim. The 50th year is like before the 50, it belongs to all the years before 50 years. It's like Shabbos. If you make a neder on Sunday, that you're not going to have wine until Shabbos, so Shabbos is included in the week. So if you make a neder, I'm not having wine till Yovel, that means until the 50th year, including the 50th year. Or is the 50th year counted towards the next cycle, and therefore the next cycle it's a new week. It's like a new Zman. So your neder will be up until Yovel and not after Yovel. So this is a very fundamental machlokes. Toshma. The Tanya we learned at the Brisa, look to the Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbanim. This is a disagreement between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanim. The Torah says, "V'kidashtem eis shnas hachamishim shana." Okay, this is a quote on the Liberty Bell. You sanctify the 50th year. The 50th year, all the slaves go free, and that's called Yovel. It's like a Shemitah after another Shemitah. So the Tanakama holds, the Tana of the Brisa holds, Shnas Chamishim Atamayna. Count the 50th year as an independent year. It's not part of the next cycle. It's an independent 50th year. The Atamayna, don't count it as Shnas Chamishim, as the 50th year, Va'achas, and as the first of the next cycle. No, it's not counted as the first of the next cycle. It's the 50th year. It's not counted independently. So therefore, really, there's 49 years, Shemitah. Then you have the 50th year. Then you start counting one Shemitah, the cycles again. The Kan Amru, From here we learned, the Chachamim learned, Yovel Eina Oile L'Minyan Shavua. It's not counted for the next cycle. And therefore, according to Rabbanan, let's speak it out, if you said, I'm not drinking wine until Yovel, you mean to include Yovel, because Yovel belongs to the previous cycle. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, Yovel Oile L'Minyan Shavua. Yovel gets counted for the next cycle. And therefore, you count you had year number 49, you celebrated Shemitah, then you're going to celebrate Yovel, but Yovel is counted as year 1 to the next Shemitah cycle. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So if a person says, until Yovel, I'm not going to make a neder, not going to drink wine, according to Rabbi Yehuda, on Yovel, you're allowed to drink wine. It's, for example, same thing. If I make a neder, I'm not going to drink wine for this week. So then Shabbos, I can't drink wine, but next Sunday I could start drinking wine because that's the new week. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Yovel is counted to the next cycle. Amr Loy Rabbi Yehuda, so the Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, according to your opinion, if Yovel is counted towards the next cycle, how will you explain this following pasuk? Arehu Oimer, the pasuk says, Sheish Shanim Tizra Sadecha Ve'ein Kan Ela Chomesh. The Torah says that for 6 years you're permitted to plow your field. Now, according to you, Rabbi Yehuda, year number 49 is Shemitah. Then year 50, which is counted as one of the next cycle, is already another Shemitah year where you're not going to plant. It's going to be like a year that you're not going to plant. Yovel is like a Shemitah year. So that means till the next cycle, for the first of the Shemitah cycles, you'll only have 5 years that you can work. Year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then that's 5. But the Torah says you always have to have 6 years that you're permitted to work. So the way the Chachamim will learn, it must be that year number 50 is not counted, and therefore you have 6 years of straight of working till the next Shemitah. That's because otherwise the Torah is telling you 6 years, and according to you, there's a possibility that right after Yovel you'll only have 5 years. Amar Lahem, so the Rabbi Yehuda answered back, a lot of times in the Chumash, you don't either make sense, you Chachamim. The Divreichem, according to your words, that every pasuk has to make sense. Harehu Oimer, the pasuk says, the Torah says, and the Torah was wondering, a guy is going to say, how can Hashem command you not to plow your field the whole Shemitah year? Where am I going to get food from? So the Torah gives you a promise. You keep Shemitah, God will make the produce last for 6 years. For example, year number 6, you're going to plant. So there'll be enough food for year number 6, number 7, and number 8, till you start getting produce from year 8, because you didn't plant in year 7, that the produce will last for 3 years. That's what the Chumash says. In response to God says, don't worry about it. I'll make sure there'll be blessing. But Rabbi Yehuda says, but according to you, Chachamim, the Torah, that pasuk also doesn't make sense, because some Shemitahs will follow a Yovel. So really, you'll need 4 years. For example, year number 49, year number 48, because 48 you're allowed to plant. So you need food for that year. Then year 49, which is a Shemitah year, and the year 50, and year 51 of the next cycle. So really, the Torah should be promising you that Hashem is going to make the produce last for 4 years. Hare Kan Arba. The Torah should promise you that the produce should last for 4 years, because sometimes you have 2 Shemitahs back to back, a Shemitah and a Yovel. Ella, but rather, you could tell you that pasuk is talking about in a normal year where the Shemitah is not followed by a Yovel. So then the promise of Hashem is that you'll have produce that lasts for 3 years. That pasuk is by every year. So the Liname, my pasuk that you asked me, the Torah says you have to work for 6 years. That will be talking about other years where the Shemitah is not followed by a Yovel, a regular year when you have Shemitah, then you can work for the next 6 years till the next Shemitah. And that's how Rabbi Yehuda says this pasuk is not difficult against my opinion. Okay, so you have 2 different opinions. A fundamental machlokes is how do we review Yovel? Is Yovel an independent year, not part of the first of the next cycle, or Yovel is a 50th year, but also counted as number one of the next 49 cycles, of the next 49 years. So it's really not 50 years. There are actually 49 years per each cycle, but Yovel is counted as year number one of the next cycle. So do you have 50-year cycles or 49-year cycles? Okay. Next. The Mishnah said, to recap, let's just see that again in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says that ad lifnei ha-Pesach. A guy says that I will not drink wine until in front of Pesach, until Pesach, before Pesach. So Rameir says, what did he mean to say? Ad yagia, until Pesach arrives, that's it. Because Rameir is of the opinion, and this is very important, Rameir is of the opinion, people generally speak clearly. And they don't speak a language that invites doubt in what they're saying. So Rameir says when a person says Pnei lifnei Pesach, before Pesach, he means I make my neder till Erev Pesach, till the Seder night. But Rabbi Yossi says no. He's also the entire Pesach. Why? What did he mean by before Pesach? Because you could say possibly there's a slight chance that he meant to say while it's still before Pesach. So let's say in Pesach, till the end of Pesach, it's always before Pesach because Pesach didn't end. Till the last second before Pesach ends, there's still a little piece of Pesach left to come. So till even the 8th day of Pesach, there's still some hours of Pesach left. So Rabbi Yossi says your neder will last until the end of Pesach. That is the machlekes between how our Gemara is going to explain the machlekes between Rameir and Rabbi Yossi. Lememra, let us say, to Rameir Sava, Rameir has this opinion, Loi me'ayel inish nafshe, a person will not invite, when he speaks languages, when he's expressing himself, he will not invite, we go to the top of Samach Aleph and Bebeit, Lisveika, that you could have a doubt in what he meant. So most of the time, I'm always going to say that he meant lifnei Pesach, I'm taking my neder before Pesach. That's what Rameir says. But Rabbi Yossi Sava, Rabbi Yossi says, ma'ayil inish nafshe l'sveika. A person could invite in his language that you could have doubts in his language. And if there's a possibility that he meant that up until there's still Pesach left to come. So he meant to include in his neder, lifnei Pesach, before Pesach, before the last second of Pesach. That's what he meant to say. So Reb Meir holds a person speaks clearly, and lifnei means before Pesach. Your neder lasts up until Pesach. And Rabbi Yossi holds no, possibly that a person will not speak clearly, and he possibly meant that is to say as long as there's still Pesach, I want my neder to take effect. So Raminhu, let us ask you a contradiction on the viewpoints. Listen to this. It's the same Rabbi Yossi, but we have a completely switcheroo in their opinions. Look at this case. It's hard to imagine this case. A guy married a woman, right? He had two girls, A and B, okay? Then that wife died, let's say, and then he married another woman, and he had two more girls, C and D. So what happened? He had two sets of daughters from two women, AB from one wife and CD from another wife. V'amar, and then he said like this: he had amnesia, right? A dementia. I don't know what he had. He had permission from the girls that to select a husband for them. So he knew when he made a shidduch, he actually probably was aware which girl he meant. But when he came home, he said, I forgot which I meant. I know I said, Kidashti esbiti hagdoila. I betrothed my oldest daughter. Now, what does it mean, oldest daughter? A, B, C are always older than D. The Eini Adeo, now we don't know what he meant to say. I can Makadish, my oldest daughter. In Gdoilis Shabbat, did he mean to say that the oldest of the oldest, which is A, in Gdoilis Shabbat, or did he mean C, which is the oldest of the second pair, of the second wife? In Katana Shabbat, or maybe he meant B, which is older than Shehi Gdoilim in Gdoilis Shabbat. because B is still older than C. So which one of those girls did he mean? A, B, and C, the first top three daughters that he has. He knows he was Mekadesh. He gave Kedushin, he accepted Kedushin for a new son-in-law for his oldest daughter. But we don't know what he meant by the oldest daughter. So Kula Nasuras, we say that all the daughters are usher to get married because they're not, we don't know who their husband is. They could be an Ashes Ish. So they'll always remain usher until we resolve the suffix. Divrei Meir. This is what Meir says. Because a person sometimes doesn't speak clearly. And perhaps he invited a doubt in what he's saying. So they're all usher except, of course, the youngest of the youngest. D, he certainly didn't mean as Gedaila because she's the youngest. Rabbi Yossi says, Kulan mutaris. They're all permitted to get married. Because we know, what did he mean? I was Mekadesh, my oldest daughter. That's what he meant. The oldest of the oldest daughter. That's what he meant. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi, because a person does speak clearly, and when he said Gedaila, he meant the number A. So we see that Rabbi Yossi holds the opposite, that a person doesn't invite doubt into his languages. He speaks clearly. And Rabbi Meir holds a person doesn't speak clearly. And we see that they have the opposite viewpoints in our Mishnah as discussed. Amar Rav Chanina bar Avdina, Rav Chanina bar Avdina said in the name of Rav, Muchlepes Hashita, you switch around the opinions of our Mishnah. Rav Meir holds that Lifnei means the throughout Pesach, and because a person, he may have meant throughout Pesach. And Rabbi Yossi holds it means a person speaks clearly. It means up until Pesach. Tanya, and that's what we learned in the Brayso. Zaklal, this is the rule. Kol shezmanai kvua. If a person says up until a certain time, like up until Pesach, my neder should take effect. V'amar, and he said ad lifnei, up until Pesach. Rameir says ad sheyetze. He means he meant till throughout the entire Pesach, because it's still before the end of Pesach. That's maybe what he meant, that still up until before the end of Pesach. It's not clear. And since he's not clear, some people do not speak clearly. Rabbi Yossi says, no, people speak clearly, and there's no doubt in what he meant. When he said lifnei, before Pesach, means ad sheyagia, until Pesach arrives. Once Pesach arrives, he doesn't have a neder anymore. New Mishnah. A person takes a neder. I'm not drinking wine. Ad ha-kotzer, until the season of reaping. Kotzer means the time that you cut wheat. Ad ha-botzer, till the time of viticulture, which is where you're cutting the grapes. Ad ha-masik, until the season of cutting olives. So masik, botzer, and kotzer are all the same thing. It's just referring to different items of produce. Wheat, grapes, or olives. So if a person says a neder, I'm not doing something, I'm not drinking wine until these times, eino asra el achi. Of course, he's not asra until that time, until they start reaping, until they start cutting grapes, until they start cutting the olives. Zahakral. Now the Mishnah gives you a general rule, because it's not so simple. Kol shezmanei kavua. Let's say you take a neder, let's say up until Hanukkah. Well, we know when Hanukkah is, Chafei Kislev, up until Pesach. Ba'ama achi agia. And he says, I make a neder up until the time of, or ad, up. All you have to do is say ad, until. Asar achi agia. Then you're asar until that time comes, till before Pesach, till before Hanukkah. Ama achi hey. But you'll say, if you said achi hey, till it was already Pesach, till it was already Hanukkah, asar achi yetzi. Then you're asar until after Pesach, until after Hanukkah. Because achi hey, till it was already. But here's the difference. Let's say there's no set beginning or end time. So, Bain Oma Achi till whether you say until it was already, Bain Oma Achi until if you said up until, Aino Asa Ala Achi you're not Asa up until that time, up until the beginning of that time. Because, sometimes, let's say the cutting of the wheat could begin April 1st. And sometimes it can begin April 10th, and sometimes it can end, in June 15th or July 8th or whatever. So there's no set time. So therefore, a person's not going to leave a neder so open-ended. So what he meant is till the beginning of the time, even if he says until it was already. What he meant to say is till it was the beginning of it. That's what it means, because there's no zman kavua. It's not a set time of beginning or ending. So people don't leave open-ended neders. Ad hakayitz, if ad shehei kayitz, if he said until kayitz is the cutting of figs. Kayitz is the cutting of figs. It's called kayitz because generally kayitz means, according to the Ran, it was picked. You used to pick the figs by hand, and then you would lay them out to dry. Okay, so that's what you pick figs. Generally, they like to dry the figs, and usually it was the summertime. So we use summer as kayitz. So then, if you say by figs, I make a neder up until the kayitz time or was kayitz. It's till the beginning of when people start picking figs off the fig tree, and they put it in baskets, and figs were picked by hand. So therefore, that's the start of the fig harvesting season. But if you say until after the picking season of figs, now until anything, the processing of figs. Now, since you use the word ya'avar, not achiyahe, but achiyavar, till after the processing of figs, well, the way they processed figs was they would lay out mats and they would put the figs out in the sun, and because it was generally picked in the summer, and therefore it dried out the figs so you can store them. So then, when is the season ending of drying out figs? Until they wrap up, everybody wraps up their own the mats, and they say, okay, we're wrapping it up, we're not doing any drying. So probably like towards the fall time when the weather turns cold, and then everybody wraps up these mats. They put these mats out because they didn't want to put the figs on the plain bare floor because then it would get dirty. Okay, let's learn the Gemara. Tanu, we learned in the Brisa, Kalkola Amru, the Kalkola that we said is Kalkola Shel Te'enim, a basket of figs, like a Kalkola Shel Anim, and not a basket of grapes. The Mishnah said, Ad Hakayitz, what is picking with your hands? Picking with your hands is only figs, not grapes. So that's what Ad Hakayitz means, picking the fig harvesting season. But not everybody agreed to that. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Hanoidim mi peres hakayitz. Somebody says, I will not eat the fruits of the kayitz. So the Tanna Kama says kayitz always refers to figs. Ein asa ela b'te'enim. It's not asur, only asuring yourself on figs, because figs were picked with a kayitz. Kayitz is is like a picking with your hands, and figs were plucked with your hands. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel disagrees. He says, "Anovim b'chlal peinim." When you make a neder, I'm not going to eat fruits of kayitz, you also mean grapes, because grapes were plucked also at times with their hands. So the Gemara explains it. My time at the Tanakama. What's the reason of the Tanakama? Kasava, they hold te'enim mikatzasam bidah. Okay, things you cut with your hands. Anovim lo mikatzasam bidah. Grapes were not cut with the hands. So when you said ad hakayitz, or peres hakayitz, you meant fruits of the figs. Shimon ben Gamliel holds anovim name. Sometimes grapes were also cut with the hands. Ki miradram, when the dried vines, the grapes of the I guess this means that the grapes of the vine, when the vine itself, the stems of the vine tree dried up, so then people chose to, for some reason, to pick the grapes with their hands. Mikatzam bidah. They would cut the grapes with their hands. So grapes also included on fruits that you pick with your hands, not with using a utensil. So that's why Shimon Gamliel holds, if you make a neder from fruits of kayitz, you also include grapes. Then we learned in the Mishnah, when is the season over for fig season? So we learned in the Brisa, until the key is most of the people already folded their mats they're done with drying out figs. All you have to do is most people, if they folded up their mats, the season is over. Let's just do one with 3 more lines over here on the top of Samach Beis Amud Aleph. Tano, we learned in the Brisa. If most people wrapped up their mats and they're done with their fig drying, so if a person walked into the fields of a person who did that, so he's allowed to take the rest of the figs on the floor because the guy is not coming back and he's already mafker it. He made it hefker. So mutaris mishum gazel, you're permitted to take them. There's no problem of stealing because the owner gave it up for free. Upaturis mina maestris, and you're parter from giving off maestris. Anything that you take for free, you don't have to give off. It's not subject to the maestris, the tax that you give to the Levi or the Kohen. Says the Gemara a story. Rabbi Rabbeinu HaKadosh, again, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Iklu lahu asra bizman shehukpalu roiv hamuktzais. Again, you got to understand, Rebbe is like Bill Gates of his time, the Havdol, and he's so super wealthy. But when it comes to teaching students, he did what the halacha is. So they came to the city, and it was a time that most of the people folded up their mats. They were done with drying out figs. So they went into the guy's field, and Rebbe, Havaka'achal, he was eating the free figs. I guess he was teaching his students to know exactly when the end of the fig season is. So that's Rebbe started eating the figs. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, loy achal, he wouldn't eat the figs because he was not sure if the owner made his figs for free. Asr Maran. So the owner came. Amalahu, he said, Amai loy achle rabbanim. Why isn't the rabbi eating my figs? Because he saw Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda as not eating, and he didn't see Rebbe eat, so he thought that both rabbis are not eating the figs that are on the floor. He says, why are you rabbis not eating figs? They already, most of the people folded up their mats, and I included that I folded up my mat. I'm not dealing with figs anymore. The season is over. Says after the person said it, so it's clear that he was mafkir his field. And yet, the Afropi came with Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda still would not eat from those figs. Why not? Because he held that when the guy spoke like that, he spoke like a yenta, like somebody who says something but doesn't really mean it. Because of like a bad heart, because he meant something more sinister. He said something like that, not because he wants to give it for free. He's just said it like, oh, you rabbis take everything for free. But he himself probably said, I don't want to give it for free. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda suspected that the rabbi didn't give it for free, and that's why Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda did not eat those figs. But Rebbe believed him. Rebbe, there was no such a thing. You speak echad b'peh v'echad b'leiv dishonestly to Rebbe. He believed him, and therefore Rebbe continued to eat from the figs. Okay.